Okay, so let's turn to the first of those elasticities that we were talking about. Yeah, and the first one, then we're going to look at the two demand elasticities that we talked about a minute ago. And the first one we're going to talk about then is income elasticity of demand. Because the letter I in economics gets consumed by lots of other things like interest rates and inflation and investment and Lord alone knows what else, income is abbreviated with the letter Y. So therefore income elasticity demand is YED. So what is it? What is it that income elasticity shows? Well, we said that price elasticity demand shows the responsiveness of demand to a change in price. So income elasticity demand, it shows the responsiveness of demand, so how much demand changes, so the responsiveness of demand to a change in income. So if income changes and demand changes a lot, then we'd say that that's income elastic. If income changes and demand changes only by a little bit, then we'd say that demand was inelastic. And that doesn't matter whether income goes up and demand goes up, or income goes up, demand goes down. It's a question of how far demand changes. So the formula for income elasticity demand is basically the same. I mean, all formulae for elasticity are the same. So in this case, they always have the percentage change in demand on the top. Because that's what we're looking at. That's what elasticity shows us, how sensitive demand is. And on the bottom, we're going to have the percentage change in the thing that affects it. And in this case, the thing that's affecting it is income. So it's the percentage change in demand over the percentage change in income. And if demand changes more than proportionally, then that will be elastic. And if demand changes less than proportionally, then that will be inelastic. Okay, so let's have a think about income elasticity then. So what we know then is that, is if income goes up, let's suppose that income was to rise by 10%, let's suppose, then what we would be expecting, is we would normally be expecting, demand to rise, wouldn't we? So you've got more money, you'll probably spend more. So one thing that's possible is income rises by 10% and demand rises by 20%, by something that's more than 10. So we get a more than 10% increase in demand. Then that would be income elastic. Let's suppose that income rises, and what happens is that demand rises, but it only rises by 5%, or it rises by less than 10% in some sense. In which case, that's going to be inelastic because it's changed less than proportionally. However, it's not necessarily the case that when income rises, demand is going to rise. You can probably think of certain types of things where, as you get richer, you don't want to buy them anymore. So as your income rises, to start with, you think, oh great, I can afford a bike. As your income rises further, you start to think, well, Christ, I don't want to get wet. I can now take a taxi and take an Uber. So, as a result of which, as income rises past a certain point, you might say that the demand for things like bicycles and buses, it starts to fall. So how are we going to show that? What we're going to say is that income rises by 10%, demand falls. Maybe it falls by a little bit. It might only fall by 5%. Again, less than 10%. But that's also inelastic because it's changed less than proportional. So it doesn't matter whether demand rises or falls when we're determining elasticity or the size of whether we're determining whether something's elastic or inelastic. Or it could be the case that demand falls by a lot. It could fall by, say, 20% or some number that is more than 10%. In which case, again, it's elastic. So how are we going to tell the difference? Well, the point is that here, when income rises, demand rises, or if income falls, demand falls. So here we have positive income elasticity demand. Here, it's going to be more than 1. And here it's going to be less than 1. Here, income rises, demand falls. We have negative income elasticity demand. Here, it's less than proportional, so that formula would be less than 1. Here, it would be more than 1. And we can see that if we just use the formula, the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in income, the percentage change in quantity demanded here is plus 20%. The change in income is plus 10%. So income elasticity demand is plus 2, which is elastic. Here, income rises by 10%, demand rises by 5%. That's plus 5% change in demand over a plus 10% change in income. That's plus 0.5. Here, if income rises by 10% and demand falls, we've got a minus 5% change in demand over a plus 10% change in income. That's minus 0.5. And finally, if income rises by 10% and demand falls by 20%, then we've got a minus 20% change in demand over a plus 10% change in income. That's minus 2. So those are both inelastic, and those two are both elastic. So what we've got to ask ourselves then is, well, what is it that's going to make demand either positive or negative? What's going to make income elasticity demand either positive or negative? And the answer is, it's really quite straightforward. If income elasticity demand is positive, what that means is that an increase in income leads to an increase in demand, a decrease in income leads to a decrease in demand. Well, that's pretty normal. That's pretty ordinary. Yeah? That's a usual thing to happen. You get rich, you buy more things. You get poor, you buy fewer things. Yeah? And those are called normal goods. And if income elasticity demand is 0 to plus 1, then they are inelastic normal goods. And if income elasticity demand is plus 1 to plus infinity, then they are elastic normal goods. Now, those sorts of things, what is it where income goes up and you buy a lot more of it, in proportional terms? It's normally something you haven't got very much of to start with. So it's often things like holidays. It's like your income goes up by, say, 10%, and instead of going on holiday once a year, you go twice. Well, that's 100% change in demand. So income elasticity demand would actually be plus 10. So these are often, some people, in some textbooks, you'll see them described as luxuries. These ones that are plus 1 to plus infinity. Personally, I prefer just to stick with income elastic and income inelastic. But that's fine. So what about negative income elasticity demand? What we know here, if income elasticity demand is negative, we know that an increase in income is going to lead to a decrease in demand, and a decrease in income is going to lead to an increase in demand. So this is, again, we were saying before, this is something where your income rises, you don't want to buy it. Your income falls, maybe you start to buy more of it. So what sort of things are these? They're things you don't really want, but maybe you have to buy. So in a recession, when income's falling, you tend to buy, kind of lower price, better value things. So often textbooks will give you an example of supermarket own brand products instead of branded products. You're more likely to go to, Primark. So often these goods, they're called inferior goods. They're things that, as your income was to rise, you wouldn't necessarily want to buy anymore, because there are better alternatives to them. So we can show this all. On a graph, of course. So let's imagine that that's income up there, and that's demand down there. We won't start at 0. So we'll assume that income. We'll assume that income has reached a certain amount, a certain level, and you're not buying anything at this. Let's suppose this is bus travel. Once income reaches a certain point, you start now to buy bus travel. So there's sort of 10k, there's 20,000. So demand starts to rise. There's 30,000, maybe demand rises again. But as income reaches 40, 50, 60,000, your willingness to travel on the bus starts to fall. So what we end up with is something that looks like that. Initially, so therefore up to about this level of income here, income elasticity demand is positive. Bus travel is a normal good. But once income reaches a certain level, you travel by car, or you take taxis or something along those lines, income elasticity demand becomes negative. So you can't really say that that any given good is either a normal good or an inferior good, because it varies by person, it varies by varies by income level, varies probably by kind of culture and so on and so forth. But what we can say is that there will be times when certain types of things are normal and certain types of things are inferior. So to sum up income elasticity demand, then what we're saying then is that goods can be either normal or inferior. What we know for normal goods is that if we know that an increase in income will lead to a decrease in the demand for inferior goods and an increase in the demand for normal goods, and we know that a decrease in income will lead to an increase in the demand for inferior goods and a decrease in the demand for normal goods. They move, and therefore for inferior goods we know that income elasticity demand is negative, and for normal goods income elasticity demand is positive. And we know that each of those can be either elastic or inelastic. So elastic inferior goods would have an income elasticity demand of -1 to -infinity. Inelastic inferior goods would have an elasticity of 0 to -1. For normal goods, inelastic normal goods would have an income elasticity of 0 to +1, and elastic normal goods would have an income elasticity demand of +1 to +infinity. And that's the basics of income elasticity demand.